going on, everybody? Timothy here with Mana Rocks. This is the second video we're making today. If you want to check out the video covering the standard limited portion of the Ikoria set, these cards, feel free to check out that video. But in this one, we will be going over the Commander spoilers for today. We've got a nice little batch, including some of the alternative commanders for some of the Commander 2020 decks that are going to release alongside Ikoria. We've got about, 15, 20 cards to talk about, including some reprints, which we won't spend a lot of time on. I'm just going to operate under the assumption that you know what the reprints do, but if they're significant to a strategy in some way, shape, or form, we might spend a little bit more time on them. But aside from that, I want to focus on new cards, new mechanics, stuff like that. Before we get started here, feel free to subscribe below if this has made any sort of significant impact on your day. If you appreciate it in any way, shape, or form, I would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, and if not, that's cool too. Thanks for hanging out. Find us on Twitter, MTG_ManaRocks. And without further ado, let's go ahead and talk some Commander 2020. Remember, Commander 2020 is Ikoria themed, so we're not going to see a lot of like sneak peeks into other sets like Phyrexia, new Phyrexia and Theros like they normally do in Commander sets. It's all going to be like Ikoria themed stuff. But our first card here is Wartime Broker. It's 3 and a red for a human warrior. It's a 4/4, so 3 and a red for a 4/4. I tend not to care as much about stat line in Commander as something like limited or constructed, because Commander's the format where this could be a 6/6 or a 1/1, and really you're playing it because you want the effect, not the stat line. Really, stat line is only super important on gigantic creatures or the commanders themselves. So, 4 mana 4/4 is respectable, but this isn't limited. We don't care that it's 4 mana 4/4. We care about the ability. It says whenever one or more creatures attacks an opponent or planeswalker an opponent controls, those creatures gain menace until end of turn. Sorry, I just brain farted for like a whole noticeable second there. Ignore that. So this is like the Gihiji effect, right? It pays people off for attacking your opponents, but also works on your creatures. So anytime you attack your opponent or their planeswalkers, your creatures get menace, which we've seen some kind of menace payoffs in the actual set. Which will be a little bit interesting to see if there's more menace payoffs in the Commander set. But remember, Red-Black kind of has this like menace matters theme running through it in Ikoria, and I guess this is to kind of supplement that a little bit. This also works when your opponents attack each other, but it is one of those asymmetrical effects where it says, hey, if you're attacking me, you don't get this bonus, you don't get menace, so why don't you attack your opponents? ? It's not as good as Gihiji, right? Because menace isn't enough of a payoff that if I'm the threat, people aren't still just going to attack me, even if I'm giving them a small benefit for attacking other people. It's not like they're gaining life. It's not like they're drawing cards. They're just getting menace, so they might not care. If you're the threat, this card isn't going to take the heat off your back. But it does mean that other people's creatures have an easier time getting through on your opponents. So it's a nice little, hey, attack these guys. It's not quite Pillow 40, because it doesn't stop anybody from attacking you, but it does say, look, if you want to attack my opponents, you're going to get paid off a little bit. And I'm a big fan of that strategy in Commander. Next up is Curious Herd 3 and a green for a rare instant. Again, rarity probably doesn't matter too much here. In fact, I think the way rarity works in Commander is a rare is a card that's in one deck, an uncommon is in multiple decks, and a common is in every deck. I believe that's how rarity works in Commander, but who knows? Actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it is, so I guess I know. So anyway, Curious Herd, 3 and a green for an instant. It says, choose target opponent, you create X 3/3 green beast creature tokens, where X is the number of artifacts that player controls. Okay. I mean, if you have an artifact deck in your meta, somebody's always playing an artifact deck, this could be a nice way to make a bunch of tokens for just 4 mana, right? Artifact decks usually go pretty hard in the paint when it comes to the artifact, so if this is 4 mana to make 5 or 6 3/3s, that's a pretty powerful ability. But as just a card that you're putting in a deck, let's say I'm making a token deck, I don't know, I'm making Reese the Redeemed or something, and I'm like, hey, I'm just looking for things that make a bunch of tokens. I don't know that this is a card I'm going to include unless I know the type of people I'm going to be playing with that often. It's also a weird inclusion to have kind of like out of the box, because there isn't really an artifact deck in this set. Ikoria is not really like an artifact set or anything like that. So if you're playing out of the box and you're kind of just, doing that thing that people do where they buy the precons and they play the precons against each other, I don't know that this card's actually going to be that effective. It might make 2/3/3s, and 4 mana for 2/3/3s isn't bad, especially at instant speed, but it's not great unless it's making 3 or more tokens, I don't think, and I don't know. It seems like a meta call choice. It's supposed to punish artifact decks, so if you've got a person playing Arkham Daxon or Brea or Urza or something like that, then Curious Herd might be a nice card to kind of combat that in your meta. But if you're playing against Urza, you probably already lost, so your card doesn't matter anyway. So Ajani Unyielding is back. Kind of a middle and planeswalker, not bad. But I don't know, if you like Ajani's, there you go. Not sure that this really fits into any sort of strategy for any of the decks, but it's a fine utility planeswalker, so not going to complain about it being reprinted here. I wonder if they're going to do that thing again where they put a planeswalker in each deck and the planeswalker sucks and nobody cares. Like the Vraska that they put in the deck last year. Anyway, Obscuring Haze. 2 and a green for a rare instant. There goes the computer again. If you can hear the buzzing on the computer, I'm sorry. It's not too much I can do about it. It has to be charging. But anyway, our card is Obscuring Haze for 2 and a green. It's an instant. And it has this new mechanic that we are going to see on one other card. And I'm assuming there's going to be a cycle. So we'll probably see one of each of these. One for each color. This one says if you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost. And that's what the other one we're going to see says too. So I'm assuming we're going to see that line of text on one card from each color. The effect you get is prevent all damage that would be dealt this turn by creatures your opponents control. So it's a fog. It's a one-sided fog, which is just leaps and bounds better than actual fog, right? It means that your creatures can still deal damage. So if you're attacking and your opponent blocks with a bunch of stuff, you can eat those blockers by using Obscuring Haze. And your creatures are still going to deal damage, right? But they're not going to take damage back. Or the alternative, and probably the more likely scenario, is you're getting attacked and you cast this and you can start putting blocks where you need to eat your opponent's attackers, and you're not going to take any damage, right? Your creatures won't take any damage either. So this is a nice one-sided fog, and it can be free, so it's got that kind of surprise factor to it, right? Not nearly as good as something like Arachnogenesis, I don't think, or, you know, a fog that you're actually going to pay mana for, because in order to be free, you do have to have your commander on board, and sometimes you just don't have your commander on board. Like, it's a thing in Commander that you sometimes don't have your commander on board. But I think this is a nice tool to have if you are constantly attacking your opponent or something along those lines. Fogs don't do too much in Commander. Like, if you're getting completely beat down and a fog is saving you, then the position you're in doesn't really change because of the fog. So the next turn you still have to deal with the same oncoming threats. At least a one-sided fog gives you the option to pick off a couple creatures in combat if your opponent made a really greedy attack expecting to kill you. And the fact that this is free means that it's, it's got that surprise factor. So, I don't know. It seems pretty sweet. It's no Teferi's Protection, but it's still powerful nonetheless. Next up, I expect this to be a pretty important card moving forward, or at least a card that people are going to be putting in a lot of different decks. It is Nesting Grounds. Really weird. I could have sworn we already had a card named Nesting Grounds, but I guess not. It's a rare land, so I guess it's only coming in one deck. Probably the Golgari deck, I imagine, is what we're looking at right now. Not Golgari, Abzan deck, the Abzan deck. It taps for colorless, so just a regular land taps for colorless. And for 1 mana, you can tap it and move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. Not necessarily that you control, but only at sorcery speed. So this is actually a card that people, I think, have wanted for a long time. There's an uncard that can take counters. I think it's called, Big Fan. It's a Giant Fan. It's down in the Thesaurus. I don't know if you can see the Thesaurus or not, but being able to move a counter, and not necessarily a +1/+1 counter, but any type of counter from one permanent to another, leads to a lot of possibilities, right? Think charge counters. You can move a charge counter from one thing onto another thing. You can move loyalty counters from one planeswalker to another. Obviously, you can move +1/+1 counters around, and if you have effects like Hardened Scales or Winded Constrictor, you can use that to kind of generate more counters each turn. There's other kind of crazy things you can do, like the sagas. You might be able to move the war counters around from one thing to another. You can take cumulative upkeep counters off of permanents and put them on other permanents where it doesn't matter, like the age counter or whatever they're called. You can just do so many things that involve counters with card like this, and there hasn't really been an option to do that before for non +1/+1 counters, right? So I think this is the type of card that leads to a lot of interest in deck building options that we didn't really have before. So it's a cool card, and I expect it to be one of the more, not broken, but more widely played or widely anticipated cards, or at least the type of card that people are going to, start brainstorming ideas around. And I'm pretty happy that an effect like this exists. There's just so many cool things you can do with it. Next up, we have our alternative commander for the Abzan deck. So we have Tayum, Luminous Enigma. It's 1 white, black, green. So again, your Abzan colors. If you don't want to play the Nightmare Insect, you have a Nightmare Beast. This is a 3/3, and it's a little interesting. So the first part is kind of just like really blah, right? It says each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. Look, I'm not going to hate on vigilance, but vigilance is like the worst ability you could have given me here. Like, give me Death Touch, give me Trample, give me Lifelink. Just give me Lifelink. Make all my creatures have Lifelink. Is that asking too much? As Commander, I can have Lifelink. It doesn't matter. Why are you giving me vigilance? If I threw a dart at a dartboard of the worst mechanics in Commander, it would just always hit vigilance because it would be the only thing on there. Anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, Tayum has an extra ability, which is kind of what you're building around if you play this as your commander. It says, for 3 generic mana, remove 3 counters from among creatures you control. That's the cost, so you have to have at least 3 counters on your creatures. And it has to be creatures. You can't take like counters off of lands or planeswalkers or whatever. The effect you get is to put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard and then return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's a little bit restrictive. You're only getting 3 or less, right? You're doing the Sun Titan thing, essentially. But it's any permanent. You can use this to ramp. You can use this to get creatures back, sack fodder, stuff like that. You can just do a lot of different things with this. Anything you can do with the Sun Titan, you can do with Tayum's ability here. What I'm more interested in is the removing counters thing, right? Because when I read that, I'm thinking of what negative counters can I remove off of things? What counters can I take off of things, right? You can take cumulative upkeep counters off of some of your creatures. I don't know. What else is there that you can take off? I'm sure there are just some really cool things you can do with this. Obviously, you can take those vigilance counters off of your creatures because you don't care about vigilance. It's also really weird that this doesn't come in with a vigilance counter for some reason. I guess because it wouldn't work. It would have to be an ETB effect, and that's not what this is. But I don't know. There's probably some really crazy things you can do with counters, creatures that get negative counters or -1/-1 counters or something like that. Maybe there's something you can do there. But I think Tayum has some potential. I have to kind of look through and see what kind of things you can do. But it gives you a real effect, right? Sun Titan and something back from the graveyard is not bad, even though you can't get like any permanent back from your graveyard. You can get significant permanents back, even if it's just like a mana rock that you're sacking a commander sphere or something like that. There's something there. I just wish the vigilance counter was anything else, because it sounds like this card knew that the vigilance counters would be kind of useless, and it's incentivizing you to remove those vigilance counters, which is just kind of like the big ol' F you to anyone who's playing this deck. It's like, oh, I'm going to give you a useless counter, or like, I'm going to give you the most useless counter we can think of that does something, and we're going to incentivize you to get rid of those counters because they kind of suck. I don't know. I wish the counter was different, or I wish it gave you a choice of what counter you want to put on, and I think that would make this card a lot better. But as it stands, you really need to be able to abuse the activated ability, and I'm not sure what ways there are to abuse it for this card to be your commander. Seems like it'd be fun out of a precon, though. I'm not knocking it. It just seems interesting. It's also creatures only. If it could remove counters from other sources, that would be a lot more interesting, but I guess that would be broken with some things. I don't know. Netherborn Altar is up next. Alright, computer, hush. Netherborn Altar is 1 and a black for a rare artifact. It says tap, put a soul counter on Netherborn Altar, put your commander into your hand from the command zone, then you lose 3 life for each soul counter on Netherborn Altar. So basically, This taps to pay 3 life and return your commander to your hand from the command zone, not from the battlefield or anything like that. So if it's locked underneath an aura, tough luck. You got to find a way to get it back into the command zone. But this is a way to repeatedly cheat on commander attacks. Granted, it gets costly very quickly, right? The first time it's 3 mana or 3 life. The second time it's 6 life, then 9 life. You can probably only do this a couple of times unless you're like an Aloro deck or something. A deck that really can gain just an absurd amount of life, something along those lines. Which those decks exist, right? This is neat, and I think that it's really cool in the context of the deck that can move counters around. It's just a little bit awkward that we just looked at a card that can remove counters, but it only removes counters from creatures, whereas this is the perfect type of card that you would want to remove counters from. There are a couple ways to make this work in a positive manner, though, without losing too much life. There is the land that we just saw, Nesting Grounds, which can take the soul counter and move it somewhere else. It doesn't matter that something else has the soul counter on it, but this kind of circumvents the cumulative life loss that you would take from the Netherborn Altar. There is also, off the top of my head, there's the, what is it called? Spark Harvester, Soul Harvester. The card from Ward the Spark, it's a blue-black zombie wizard that taps to remove a counter from a non-enchantment permanent you control to draw a card. So you can kind of use that to eat the soul counters off of Netherborn Altar to be able to keep using it without losing too much life. And of course, this is all to say that you want to be able to keep using your commander over and over again, so maybe there's some combo potential there, but this is just a nice way to circumvent commander attacks. I'm not sure what decks really want this, or what decks can afford to just lose 3, then 6, then 9 life, so on and so forth, but it basically lets you use a life to get around commander attacks by putting that commander in your hand where commander attacks doesn't apply. So neat tool to have. Not sure how often we'll be using it. Lifecrafter's Bestari is being reprinted. That's just a fine, solid green card. I haven't seen it a lot lately, but when it was first printed, people played it quite often in their green decks. And if you're playing like a mono green deck, it's a nice little card advantage tool. It gets you extra cards for casting creatures, and it just gives you that extra little scry one every turn, which is a nice ability to have. Not the selling point of the card, but green card advantage. We've actually come a long way with green card advantage, but Lifecrafter's Bestari, it fits that spot pretty nicely. Next up, because everybody was clamoring for another scavenge card, it is Boneyard Mycodrex. Okay, whatever. It's 2 and a black for a star, and the power and toughness are each equal to the number of other creatures in your graveyard. So that applies anywhere, by the way. If this card is on the stack, or if it's in your graveyard, or if it's in your library, that star will always count whatever the power or whatever it says it counts on the card. In this case, the number of other creatures in your graveyard. It also has scavenge, so it's 4 and a black to scavenge. If you've never played with scavenge, you exile this card from your graveyard, and then you put counters on target creature you control equal to the power of this card, right? So if you scavenge this and you exile it from the graveyard, and then you count that you have 5 other creatures in your graveyard, this is going to put 5+1/+1 counters on target creature. And that's fine, right? I don't think this is anything super exciting for Commander. It's not really something new, right? If you want a creature that cares about how many cards are in your graveyard, we already have cards like that. If you care about a way to put a bunch of counters on a creature, we already have stuff like that. This is one of those like out-of-the-box type cards that I think is going to be fun to play with if you're playing just precons versus precons, but not really a card that I think is breaking anything or covering any new ground. So Boneyard Mycodrex, that's a fine card. This would be the type of card I'd be more excited about in Limited, but for Commander, not really my cup of tea. You know what is my cup of tea? Mind Leecher. Mind Leecher is my cup of tea because I don't have all the money in the world to be buying these super crazy awesome cards. So I like cards that let me play with my opponent's cards because they do have all the money in the world, and if I can play with their cards, I don't have to worry about playing with my own cards. Mind Leecher lets me do that. Anyway, the card is 4 black for a 5/5. It's a nightmare with flying, so 6 mana 5/5 flyer. That's significant in Commander. You know, Dragon will beat you down every now and then. It has Mutate for 4 and a black. And I'm going to guess that this is a Commander exclusive Mutate creature. This could be a type of creature that's actually in the Ikoria set. but I don't know that for sure. I'm just going to assume that since it's chunked in with the rest of the Commander stuff here on the spoiler site, that this is exclusive to the Commander deck, that we won't be seeing this in the actual Ikoria set. Could be wrong about that, I don't know. But anyway, 6 mana, 5/5 flyer, mutates for 5 mana, and it says whenever this creature mutates, exile the top card of each opponent's library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. So you get to, I call this Gonti. You just get to Gonti the top card of each opponent's library, and it is the good type of effect where you, even if the Mind Leecher dies, you still have access to those cards, and they're face down, so you get the kind of like surprise factor, like, ooh, what does he have? What did he get from me? Stuff like that, right? Really cool card. I think Wizards just loves printing these cards nowadays that let you play with your opponent's cards, and I'm a big fan of that strategy. I've had a Joliva deck that cares about my opponent's spells. I have Send Triplets, stuff like that. Just all of these decks that are cards that let you kind of Gonti your opponent. Now, one thing to note here is that it doesn't have the color clause that we're used to nowadays. It doesn't say that you may play those cards with any color of mana, so you still have to play the pay the actual cost. You still have to pay the appropriate colors of mana. And it does say play, so you can play lands off of this too, which is nice. But just a couple nuances there to keep in mind. Again, this isn't like a synergistic card with anything, unless you're playing the Mutate deck, right? If you care about Mutate, then sure, this card is sweet because you can keep mutating onto it to trigger it again. But as just a regular card in a normal deck that cares about casting your opponent's spells, you can mutate this onto something else and get a couple freebies off of it, which is pretty nice. The fact that it lets you play lands is always nice. Up next, we have Sanctuary Blade. 2 mana for an equipment. The equip cost is 3. It's a little expensive. That's 5 mana before you get this going. As Sanctuary Blade becomes attached to a creature, choose a color, and equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has protection from the last chosen color. It's worded that way so you can't keep re-equipping it to gain new colors and then suddenly it gives you protection from everything. This is pretty sweet. I don't know what deck wants it, but if you're looking to beat down with your commander or you're looking to just get a creature in, you can equip this and then just start dashing. It is a little bit awkward too that this is printed in a set that has 3 color cards in it. So, protection is a lot worse the more colors your opponents are playing. So out of the box, this might be a little bit of a blank, but it gives you something, right? You can usually find one player at the table who can't get through one protection ability. Just think like Feast or Famine. How often do you have a Feast or Famine on board and like 2 of your opponents just can never block ever again or kill your creature? Sanctuary Blade is like the poor man's swords of X and Y. It's just Sword of X, and it's a little bit expensive to get going. But if you need to get a creature in there, if you have an incentive to be hitting your opponent, maybe you're just trying to go for commander damage or something like that, then Sanctuary Blade is kind of cool. Obviously, if you are playing budget friendly, right, you might not be able to afford a Sword of Feast and Famine or any of those XY cards. This can be a nice alternative in a commander game. Protection from a chosen color is still very relevant in commander, even though it's not quite as potent as like Feast and Famine or Sword of Fire and Ice or something like that, but still gets the job done. Molten Echoes. All right, so we've got some random tribal stuff going on here, I assume for the human deck. Molten Echoes is 2 red for a rare enchantment. It says, as it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Human, probably, in the precon. Whenever a non-token creature of the chosen type enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of that creature. That token gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So you've got kind of your Flame Shadow Conjuring type ability for a creature of the chosen type. The cool thing is you don't have to pay mana to trigger the ability, right? It just makes an extra copy of each creature that enters the battlefield. Kind of awkward that it triggers on legendary creatures, so you will make an extra legendary creature and then it'll just die immediately to the legend rule. But if your deck cares about a certain creature type, obviously this is in the human precon. It has to be in the human precon because it's the only tribal deck in our kind of bunch this year. But this is the type of card you could play in a Goblin deck. You can play it in any tribal deck that's playing red, and if you care about having more of that creature on board, then Molten Echoes is going to be fine. Tribal decks are super popular in Commander. I like tribal decks. I have a tribal cube that this will probably go in, and I think it's a fun deck card. Flawless Maneuver. So the white one in our free commander cycle, whatever you want to call this cycle. Flawless Maneuver is 2 and a white. For an instant, it says if you control a commander, you may cast this spell without paying its mana cost, and creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. So if this was just 3 mana, all your stuff is indestructible, that's not going to cut it in commander. It's just not good enough, right? And it's not that that's necessarily bad, it's just that the options are better. There's cards like Make a Stand, which is the same mana cost, the same effect, but it also gives your cards like creatures like +1/+0 or something. There's a Unbreakable Formation from the Ravnica set that had the addendum clause to put a +1/+1 counter on all your creatures, but also always gave your creatures indestructible for the same cost. So the selling point here is that you can cast this card for free if you have a commander on board. And note that these say a commander, not your commander. So if you stole an opponent's commander or something like that, then they still function as a free spell. And this is a nice little get you moment. If you have a board with a commander on board that you need to protect and your opponent goes for the board wipe because you're tapped out, you can say, haha, Flawless Maneuver, my stuff lives. And sure, that's fine. But it's also not that hard to hold up like a Golgari Charm or something, or a Boros Charm, and just make all your creatures indestructible anyway. And I don't think this is going to make it or break it. It's probably a fine card if you are the type of person who just loves tapping out, or maybe you're a Voltron deck that just needs to put all their resources into getting their creature pumped up with equipment or auras or whatever. Flawless Maneuver can be a nice way to make sure your creature is going to survive until the next turn, at least from a destroy effect or something. It can still get exiled, which is kind of annoying. Alicia, who smiles at death, is back for the human deck. Sweet little card. You can also play it as your commander. It is technically Mardu colors, and it is technically a human. So if you care about the human decks, then Alicia's fine. And if you want to just build your own Alicia deck and combo off with Karmic Guide and Felidar Guardian and Ashnod's Altar, then so be it. It also, I believe, is the first time Alicia has the new frame, which is kind of nice. I do love the new legendary frame. Anytime I can upgrade an old legend to the new frame, I'm pretty happy with it. This is actually a reprint, but it's worth talking about. Shared Animosity. It says, if you have never seen this card before, it's 2 and a red. Again, it's a reprint. 2 and a red for an enchantment that says whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each other attacking creature that shares a creature type with it. It's kind of busted, and I believe it's an expensive card. I know foils run somewhere around $25+, and I believe it's never been reprinted. I could be wrong. It might have had like a printing in a supplementary product or something like that. But it's a nice tribal card that people don't really have a lot of access to, or at least you don't see it too often because it was in one of the Lorwyn sets, Shadowmoor or something, and just, I guess, didn't get printed a lot. And it's fairly expensive for the type of effect you get. But it's nice. If you attack with 3 humans, they all get +3/+0. I guess +2/+0. But it has the potential to just push out a ton of damage in a tribal deck that can make a bunch of creatures of the same type. So if you were looking for a copy of Shared Animosity, you should be able to get it in the human deck this year, which is pretty nice. It's a very welcome reprint. All right, a couple more cards to talk about. Shiny Impetus. I love the art. Is this just like a cat that has like Chandra's goggles on it, or is this just like, I don't know. It looks like Chandra's goggles from that Act of Impulse card, or Act on Impulse. Anyway, whatever. Shiny Impetus is 2 and a red for an uncommon aura. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and is goaded. If you've never played with goad before, that means the creature that's goaded must attack if able and has to attack someone other than you if able. Obviously, you want to put this on your opponent's creatures, and that forces them to attack someone other than you. Plus, also pumps the creature. Godin is really sweet. It also says whenever enchanted creature attacks, you create a treasure token. That's the Shiny Impetus, right? This is pretty cool as far as flavor goes, right? There's something shiny over there. I must attack, right? Pretty cool. It's like a combination of the curse that gives you treasures or gold tokens or whatever, and the blade from last year, the bloodthirsty blade that you could equip to your opponent's creatures and goad them. I like it. It's a little bit awkward though because it is an aura, and it's really easy to just blink a creature or sacrifice a creature or something like that, and then you lose the Shiny Impetus, whereas that blade, the bloodthirsty blade, could be re-equipped every time you wanted it to. So this is a one-shot effect, and it's pretty easy to get around. But early in the game, it's pretty neat. and it does reward you. It gives you treasure. Red could always use more ramp, more treasure, stuff like that. And if you're the play style that wants other people to attack each other, or you're just trying to get a creature off of your back, Godin is a nice way to do it. So it's a really sweet card. Not as good as the Bloodthirsty Blade, which turned out was very good, but still kind of neat, and I like the flavor of it. Two more to talk about, two more alternative commanders. We have Kelsian, I don't know. We're going to say Kelsian, the Plague. It is Mardu colored, so red, white, black for a 2/2 human assassin with vigilance and haste. Okay. It gets +1/+1 for each experience counter you have. Haven't seen experience counters since Commander 15? What year had experience counters? They were really popular commanders for a long time too. Granted, we didn't have as many options, but I believe this is a one-off card that's going to make experience counters in the set, and it has a tap ability. It deals 1 damage to target creature you don't control. When that creature dies this turn, you get an experience counter. So by itself, obviously, as a standalone card, this is a very whatever kind of card, right? You do need to combine it with either Death Touch or ways to untap it, or maybe ways to give your opponents tokens and stuff like that. And then Kelsian starts getting bigger as well every time those creatures die. It can't target your own creatures, obviously, as a way to make sure that you're not abusively just killing your own tokens to get more experience counters. But what really intrigues me is that experience counter cards work together, right? Experience counters go on the player, not on the creature. So if you can accumulate a bunch of experience counters and then play another card that cares about experience counters, you can actually share those experience among your creatures, which is weird because none of those cards really fit in decks together. You'd have to be playing a 4 or 5 color deck or something like that to really fit a bunch of experience counter cards together, and they have just such disparate themes that they don't really go together. But what could you play? If you have Kelsian as your commander, you could put Kalemne in the deck. Is that it? It's just Kalemne, right? I don't think there's any other experience counter cards in this color combination. I don't even remember what they were. There was Marin, there was Azuri, there was Mazarek, can't play that. And then there was one other one that I'm just blanking on, but it's blue, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, Kalemne is the only other experience counter card you could play in Kelsian, and those cards don't really work together, so it's weird. I was hoping if they ever brought experience counters back for some reason that they would be more universal cards, not a 3-color card, but whatever. If you care about pinging your opponent's creatures, if you're looking for, I don't know, some sort of like Basilisk Collar combo card, Thornbite Staff, I guess, is very similar, then yeah, this is pretty cool. It's a pinger. It has a vigilance. Again, they just given stuff vigilance for no reason. It makes sense, but vigilance is so boring. And the only real reward you get here is that this thing gets bigger. I don't think you're going to see this as a commander a lot. So, I don't know. A little bit of a miss, I think, on Kelsian. But, again, cool designs. People can always break stuff. So, there's something cool. Here's something that's not vigilant and not lame. Excuse me. Xsara the Exemplary. Wow. Xsara the Exemplary. Really? We went there? Okay. 1 black, green, blue for a 2/3 Nightmare Hydra. Why? That's so annoying. Why would you make a 2/3 Hydra? I think people are going to complain about that so much. A 2/3 Hydra? That is not a Hydra. Hydras are 0/0s or symmetrical or something. Come on, 2/3? Whatever. Anyway, the card's still cool. Just knocking it. A little bit of a miss on the Hydra power and toughness there. It has Death Touch. 3 mana, 2/3 Death Touch. Whatever. You can put Death Touch on whatever commander you want. It doesn't really change my opinion of it. It says tap to add 2 mana of any one color. Okay, so I can ramp with my Xsara. Weird. What am I using with that mana? Or what am I doing with that mana? It says whenever you cast a spell with X in its mana cost, create a 0/0 green Hydra creature token, then put X +1/+1 counters on it. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. A commander that cares about X. We have Rasheen is really the only one that currently exists. Rasheen the Meanderer, which taps to add 4 colorless mana, but you can only use it on X spells. But that's more of like an enabler than it is a payoff. It's also in red and green, whereas this is in black, green, and blue. And this cares about any spells you cast with X in their mana cost. And you know what X cost is in black, green, and blue? Everyone's favorite X spell, Villainous Wealth, right? I'm assuming if Xsara is an alternative commander in this Sultai deck, that we're probably going to see Villainous Wealth in there because people love that card, me included. It's just really sweet. Genesis Wave an opponent's library. And Xsara pays you off for casting X spells. It's not as good of a payoff as like the Boundless Flourishing from Modern Horizons, the one that actually doubled your X's, as this just makes creatures. But if you are playing an X cost deck, making creatures whenever you're doing the thing that you want to do is a nice payoff effect. In fact, that's true for any strategy, right? If you're an enchantment deck, a card that makes creatures whenever you play an enchantment is very relevant. Think like Sigil of the Empty Throne or something like that. Or if you are a deck that cares about spells, anything that makes a creature whenever you cast a spell, like the Sharknado card or the Talran, something like that. It's just a nice payoff to any sort of archetype that you're trying to build. The payoff being make a creature whenever you do the thing that your deck cares about doing. So Xsara, I think, is a little bit of a hit, even though it's weird. It is very weird. Why does it tap for mana? I guess to help you cast your X spells. Why does it have Death Touch? I don't know. Why does it have Death Touch? Does that matter? Why is it a 2/3 Hydra? Whatever. I think there are some weird things going on. The complete, image that I'm looking at, I don't even know what's going on in the art. It's strange, but I think it's cool. And it opens up, a new route for Sultai decks to take that care about X spells, or maybe even care about Hydras. I don't know. This does make a bunch of Hydras. So it's pretty sweet. I don't know how to abuse it in these colors. I guess just play green Hydras, or you have Exsanguinate type effects, or Torment of Hellfire. There's plenty of blue X spells. I guess there's X spells in every color, whatever. You can definitely abuse this card, but it doesn't really make your X spells more potent. It just gives you creatures. So I think fair, balanced, pretty neat. Can be used as mana ramp, and there's just a lot of weird things. I'm kind of rambling at this point, so that's going to do it for Xsara the Exemplary. If you like alliteration, it might be your commander. I don't know. So that's going to go ahead and do it for our spoilers today. Not really too many complete standout cards here. I think Nesting Grounds is definitely cool. I think the free card cycle has some potential. Netherborn Altar, I can see getting a little bit combo-y. Mind Leecher is probably my favorite card of the bunch. And then outside of that, Xsara is a nice commander. Shared on Animosity is a sweet reprint. But not too much else that I'm super dying to have here. I think Kelsian is just almost a complete miss, and I think they missed an opportunity on Teum to either give a better counter or be able to remove counters from non-creature permanents, which I think it's a little bit of a miss that neither of those things happened. But that's going to go ahead and do it for our Commander spoilers for today. Again, it is a Saturday, so I don't think we're going to get a lot of spoilers on a Sunday. But if we get spoilers tomorrow, we'll go ahead and make a video for them. If not, I'll see you guys on Monday. And I would love to hear what you guys think is interesting from these spoilers, what your expectations are, what kind of commander cards are you hoping for from this product, especially knowing the themes that we've got here. I was not expecting a Sultai X Matters card, so stuff like that is always welcome. You can let me know in the comments below what you're looking for and what you're excited about, and stay tuned for more spoilers as they keep rolling out more Ikoria. So, again, my name's Timothy with Manrocks. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see you all next time.